In the darkness, a voice was heard, asking her not to go there, begging her not to die and not to leave her alone. The voice called her Mrs. Hestia, and she realized that it was a very familiar voice. He said that he would be able to protect her no matter what, and therefore he begged her not to go anywhere. His voice could not bear this separation, and therefore if she died to save those people, he would kill them all. Suddenly, the heroine opens her eyes. It was just a dream, and it looks like she dozed off. She was surprised how much she could fall asleep, and although she was reborn a long time ago, she still remembered this voice clearly. After recovering a little from the sudden dream, the girl realized that she was sewing a dress, and she yawned heavily because she understood. In this empire, the illegitimate children of aristocrats live worse than commoners, and it was here that she was born in the body of the child of a count and his maid. And now her name was Cecilia Eilant. She was no longer Hestia, she was now a different person, and she was living her second life. The heroine yawned heavily. Not only did she have a strange dream while she was sleeping, but now she has this dress to finish by morning, so she should hurry. Looking around, she noticed the darkness in the room and realized that the magic lamp had gone out while she was sleeping. She had to light it again, putting her hands together and concentrating, and the room suddenly lit up with a magical light. And when it was finished, a small but bright light was created, which should be enough for further work. The heroine realized that she could fall asleep again, and in that case the light would go out, and that would not be good. So she snapped her fingers, and a magic circle appeared above her head, from which a strange beast flew out. She turned to him and asked him to watch over the magic light. Even if she fell asleep again, the little beast happily flapped his wings and then approached the light source. The heroine instructed him to maintain the magic light, so that it would not fade in any way, and she could continue her work in peace. Morning came, the girl worked all night, and finally finished, even ahead of schedule, and so she was sure that for such beauty she would be paid extra, and so she was very pleased with herself. In a moment, she caught sight of the beast, which was already sleeping peacefully, and she noticed that the light was slowly fading, waking him up. The girl accused him of giving him an errand, and he brazenly fell asleep at his post. Forgiving the tired creature, the girl said that she hoped her sister would like the dress and not be angry, when suddenly the doorbell rang and the lady called for the heroine, and she had to get there immediately. She was worried that if her sister was already awake, she would be very angry if she was late, and it was probably too late. But she hurried to her sister's room anyway. The sister's name was Irina Eilant, and she immediately accused the girl of being lazy today, and she would be in trouble if she was late for the banquet of the ex-Duke of Janissens. The heroine apologized for this, assuring that she had carefully sewn the beads onto the dress, and since she was doing it for her sister, she wanted to do it in the best way possible, so she tried very hard. The sister, exhaling heavily, asked if the heroine had had time to sleep, but she assured her with a smile on her face that she had managed to sleep and make the dress, so she should not have worried about it. The girl just snorted, as if she didn't have to worry about her, and then she realized it was time to change, so she started trying on her new outfit, and strange memories came flooding back to the heroine. The man was screaming hysterically, saying that everyone close to her, including the maids, everyone who used her power, she would kill them all, and the girl had a headache from these strange visions. She was worried, and went to look for records of past events. But she found nowhere to confirm that he had followed through on all his threats. And besides, even though she had all the memories, her past life should stay in the past. Whoever she was in the past, and whatever happened then, she is now. Her thoughts were interrupted by her sister's shout, ordering her to move, as she was already late. But now everything was decided. Now the heroine would live as Cecilia Eilant. A drunken man dropped a bottle of wine and broke it. A servant was in the room, and he assured him that the man would harm his health in this way, but that he would finally be able to rest at the banquet. This man was Cillian Janison, and he suddenly remembered that there was a banquet today, but he didn't dwell on this question, so he asked another, namely what was going on with the search for Hestia. The servant remained silent, and in a moment the man stood up and shouted at him, asking why he did not answer. Hadn't the child with black hair been born yet? Hadn't he been found yet? And resigned to the helplessness of his subordinates, he threw him out of the room. After sending the servant away, he began to talk to himself, remembering Hestia. He thought about her, that it was time to show herself, at least once. Had she not remembered him at all? In all these years, he had never managed to forget her. 500 years ago, she still sacrificed herself to save people. And since then, he has been waiting for half a millennium for her rebirth, repeating her name day after day, fanatically wanting to meet her. The heroine assured her sister that she would be the center of attention, and such beauty could not but attract attention. But her sister disagreed, as this ball was in honor of the Archduke's victory, and she could not steal everyone's attention from him. But the girl didn't give up, and trying to comfort her, the heroine compared the girl to a fresh May rose, which no flower, even in the richest greenhouse, can compare to. Her sister thought about it for a while, but still succumbed to all the praise and proudly agreed to it all. As she escorted her to the carriage, her sister announced that the girl was going with her, which made her very surprised at the surprise. The heroine realized that if she wanted to, she would not leave her behind so easily. So she agreed and asked for at least 10 minutes to get ready and hurried to her room. When she returned to her room, she realized that tonight would be a full moon, and it could end badly, but she couldn't refuse anyway. So she hoped that nothing would happen tonight, at least until the full moon ceremony. When she was done with her preparations, the girl returned to the carriage, apologizing for being late because she decided to dress nicely so as not to disgrace her sister. Irina noticed that the heroine had bought herself a rather open dress, although it was the same one she had given away because she didn't want to wear it anymore. And she also saw painted lips, although the girl claimed that it was all from running. Assuring her that she was too young for that, the sister took off her shawl and gave it to the girl so that she would not show her shoulders to everyone, and she gave her her jewelry, which made the heroine's eyes shine. She assured her that even though the heroine was getting ready in a hurry, she still didn't have enough jewelry to accompany her, so she could wear at least this. The girl could not imagine that such expensive jewelry was so expensive, and therefore she was not sure but said that she would wear it very carefully. Irina noticed that the girl hadn't thought about it at all, and that she would add it to her travel expenses later, as she would have to accompany her everywhere, and therefore should look good. After that, she quietly declared that all this was nonsense. She didn't even need to go anywhere. She should just live in her father's house so that a good husband could be found for her. And she was already quite grown up, so she wouldn't go traveling with her. The sister didn't understand why the girl's eyes were shining so much at the sight of money or jewelry, but she was just pleased. And then Irina told her to just keep the jewelry she had given her carefully, so that the heroine would not live in poverty when she left her parents' house. She, in turn, assured her sister that she should get married as soon as possible, because then she would become the head of the family, and then she could hire her to work so that they could travel together and get property. In the empire, women could inherit the family's property if they found a husband. So her sister said that when she became the head of the family, she would not only share the property with the heroine, but also buy her a rank. And the girl kept laughing cheerfully, assuring her that she was very happy about it. Her sister was very stubborn and rarely thought about what she was saying, but she was nevertheless happy to be her younger sister. Usually, illegitimate children are mistreated and destined to live in poverty, but Irina really considers the heroine to be her younger sister, and therefore even takes care of her. Entering the city, my sister noticed that there were many other carriages, and so she noticed that aristocrats from all over the empire had gathered here. But this was a common thing, because it was the Archduke's ball. He practically did not go out all this time, keeping a mysterious image behind him. And so everyone was curious, and that's why everyone gathered. The sister only said arrogantly that all the inhabitants of the empire had already seen his face. The name Yannickson already spoke for itself. Nowadays, this name is not very common, but in his past life, 500 years ago, this name was so common that it could be used to name even stones on the road. And at that time, there was a boy named Yannickson next to the heroine, and not so long ago she mentioned him, although they were not at all alike at that procession. Not so long ago, a procession was held in this district, and Ergergots Yannickson himself was walking with his knights, and everyone could see what he really looked like. He was called the hero of the sword, because only thanks to him, the war with the barbarians was soon over, after which he became a great master of this time. The Yannickson family has always had the right to take actions that were available only to the imperial family, such as making decisions in relation to other aristocrats, and everything about the history of the family and its members was absolutely hidden from people. The girl assured herself that he could not have anything to do with the guy she knew. The head of the Yannickson family had been hiding from society for a long time, and one day he suddenly showed his face and defeated the enemy soldiers. Everyone, without exception, was shocked by what they saw. He was a true sword hero. The heroine was very surprised to learn that he was called a great master. There was no more mana left in this world sufficient for the emergence of a great master. And besides, the source from which she was beating, that is herself, had also died. But it didn't matter, because the girl thought it was incredibly beautiful, as they say that the more mana in a person's body, the more beautiful they are. And the true image of Cecilia was also very beautiful. While she was watching him, the heroine noticed that he was not happy at all. He looked both despondent and full of anger, as if he was dispelling the darkness itself. And suddenly, the man noticed the stare and looked in the direction of the girl, and surprised the heroine as they met her eyes at that moment. When the man looked in the direction of the girl, he was surprised, as he thought he saw a familiar mana, and then assured himself that this was impossible, since the only one who had such a mana was the one who had left him in the distant past. The heroine met his eyes and instantly hid, assuring herself that he could hardly have been looking at her, as there were many people downstairs. And besides, she had a different appearance that caught his eye, or maybe it wasn't like that at all, and she just thought it was because she was used to people not paying attention to her at all, and this made her look there again. People panicked and were afraid to point their fingers in the direction of the child hanging from the ledge, who must have fallen when he looked at the march, and there was a monument right below him, and they could not let him fall. The sister, without any emotion, noticed that it was a monument to the emperor, and if he fell on such a sharp thing, it would be bad, and the heroine assured him that he should hurry. She could have easily saved him, but if she used the magic that had long since disappeared, it would have clearly attracted a lot of unnecessary attention, and she would hardly be able to hide the fact that she had used it. And if it becomes known again about the existence of what was still sealed inside her, she will probably have to go through all the horror that she went through in her past life again. Meanwhile, the owner of the hotel where the boy was staying approached the people and gave them the keys to the side door, and at that moment, the boy snapped. Everything happened instantly. People noticed a trail of lightning that went straight to the monument, which suddenly left a trail of dust, and in a few moments everything became clear. The Archduke had saved the child. It seemed as if everyone was happy at that moment, everyone except the owner, who said that he was happy that the child was saved. But since the statue was destroyed, he did not know how to compensate for it. The Archduke silently approached and handed the owner a precious stone, to which the latter was visibly surprised at such generosity, asking if the man really wanted to give away such a valuable stone. But he only told the owner to just take the stone in silence and get out of here. The heroine, realizing that the child was saved and she no longer had any reason to show her strength, breathed a sigh of relief. But a moment later she was stunned that the man could not have just appeared here, as he had to cut through 2 gates in front of him with his sword to get here. Looking closely at him, she noticed that he was muttering something under his breath, something about black hair, at which point the girl's memories were interrupted by her sister, still riding in the carriage to the ball. "I want to take the place of the Archduchess," her sister said, making the heroine very surprised. It was very strange. She knew, of course, that Irina loved power most of all, and she assumed that her sister would sooner or later start looking for a partner who had a high status. The heroine thought that she would choose not the Archduke, who was not at all interested in politics and power, but the emperor's second son, who would become the future heir to the crown. Or did she change her mind about becoming empress? The girl remembered her sister's words when she said that at today's banquet she had to stand out by all means, but that after decorating herself, people's opinion of her appearance could change even a little bit for the better. In any case, the heroine put these thoughts out of her mind, because if her sister wanted something, wanted it badly, the girl would definitely help her achieve it, because she wanted all her sister's dreams to come true. But even though she promised this, When she saw this man, she thought that he was clearly not worth it. To the surprise of all the guests, this man came to the banquet already very drunk, even though nothing had started yet. The girl looked at him and didn't understand. This banquet was organized in his honor, and he didn't even bother to prepare an introduction. There was a rather strange atmosphere in the air, and the heroine was worried that her sister would be disappointed in him after what she saw. Turning her gaze to her, the girl saw a dispassionate look. She realized that her sister had already made conclusions. Her face was clearly written how annoying he was to her and how she no longer saw him. The servants came up, and the heroine was about to beg them to bring him to his senses until her sister's patience broke, when suddenly she heard a loud voice asking in a commanding tone why everyone was just standing there, because it was such a beautiful day. But for some reason she didn't hear any laughter at all. The girl began to worry, not understanding why these ladies were up to something like this. The man hadn't even said a word, and they were already running ahead of him. So the two princesses decided to come here, one Princess Yuri and the other Iris, after which the first one said that it was time to start the banquet that was organized in honor of the great victory won by their great Archduke. No one understood why the princess decided to make the opening remarks herself, as if she was showing everyone that she would become his future wife, and the princess herself continued, and in her own name, wished that the gracious radiance of the holy relic would illuminate the empire. When she heard about the sacred relic, the heroine was shocked, screaming in her head that she shouldn't do it, but no one heard her, and everything around her suddenly lit up with a bright light. The people were delighted with these events, claiming that they had just been blessed by the holy Lemuridia, and one of them said that the scar he had received 20 years ago after a fall had begun to disappear. Everyone admired the great power of the sacred relic, which was passed down from generation to generation in the imperial family, and people believed that this miraculous power was proof that the gods were still protecting their empire. Everyone praised the princess and her relic, and she, as if she had not received enough attention and honor, offered to pay tribute to all the soldiers who had given their lives for the safety of the empire. The Archduke began to come to his senses, thinking that everything was repeating itself, and in fact, this power belonged to a woman they had killed with their own hands. They boasted of the relic as if it, created from the flesh and blood of the dead Hestia, were their own power. Regardless of the fact that it had been transmitted for so many centuries, he was still disgusted to watch it. And yet the man was indescribably bored and could not wait for it to be revived. While he was waiting for her to be revived, the man decided to get the highest position so that in the future he could protect her from anyone and give her everything she wanted. He also tried to get rid of all the insects that could theoretically damage it, because he didn't want the tragedy of the past to happen again. But no matter how much gold he collected, and no matter how many times he covered the entire empire with roses again, no matter how long he waited, she did not revive again. So what use was there in what he had achieved? He was already very tired of this annoying world without her. Suddenly, everything around us began to smell like a strange odor, and people did not understand where it was coming from or what exactly it was. Perhaps the smell of flowers or perfume, or perhaps the smell was disguised by incense. This commotion also attracted the hero's attention, thus making him wake up. He recognized this smell out of 1,000. He knew that such a scent came from Hestia's mana, and therefore immediately stood up, for the first time in the evening, surprising everyone present. He was looking for where the scent was coming from, looking at all the guests, and then came to the conclusion that it probably wasn't coming from here, and then he had to quickly go outside and find where the smell was coming from. The princess tried to stop him, asking him what had gotten into him, but he only angrily pulled away from her, thus showing his attitude and his priorities. The woman accused him of daring to act in such a way towards her, but he walked away, not paying attention to everything that was happening. Suddenly, people started talking around, saying that they had heard that a princess was trying to persuade the Archduke to marry her, and he slammed the door in front of her, not even listening, while others said that they thought it was just gossip, because the princess was very confidently playing the role of his fiancée, and he was not even outraged. The princess heard all this, and realized that not so long ago these people almost worshipped her, but now they are throwing mud at her. Her Princess Yuri was disgraced, not once but twice, and therefore she said that she would see how long the man could ignore her. Meanwhile, the heroine suddenly became very ill. Her sister noticed this and asked her what happened and what hurt. But the girl realized that the ring the princess brought here, if she had known that a sacred relic would be present, she would never have come here. It was as if she had lost a little of her mana, the power that was locked deep inside her, screaming with hunger for 7 days. She tried to absorb all the power of the sacred relic in anger. Because of this power, she suffered so much and even died in her previous life. So why couldn't she simply avoid this pain by being reborn? And if she was really destined to suffer here, why was she born at all? Suddenly, she saw her sister worried, and she saw a vision from her past life where the girl was crying and saying that she wanted to have a life after rebirth in which she would not have to deny herself anything. And even now, the only one who was so dear to her was taken away. And so she did not regret that after being reborn in a new life, something like this happened again. Looking at her sister, the heroine began to realize that, even though she didn't know why, she had also been reborn. She was glad to be able to meet her again. She hugged her excited sister's hand, remembering that she had promised her that she would do whatever she wanted. And so she assured herself that she didn't have to worry, that she could do everything like she did then, and she just had to draw a seal in her mouth. And suddenly a small layer came out of it, and she was determined to contain the flowing mana by sealing it in this layer. After a moment, the layer came back, and the heroine said that this would probably happen no sooner than in a few days, but she still felt much better than before. Suddenly, her sister took her by the shoulders and started shaking her, demanding to know what had happened to her. But she assured her that everything was fine now, and she was just dizzy. So she asked him to stop shaking her because she was getting even more dizzy. Trying to change the subject, the heroine asked where the Archduke had disappeared, to which her sister said that he had just taken off somewhere. But that didn't matter now, as she was afraid for her younger sister, as she looked very sick. Trying to calm the older woman's anger, she asked her to speak quietly, because if someone heard, they might think that she did not tolerate her husband. But she said not to talk nonsense, because she was speaking quietly enough that no one but the two of them could hear. The heroine thought that something might happen because of the sacred relic, but everything went quite well, and her sister seemed to be so surprised that the girl felt sick that she even forgot how angry she was with the Archduke. Of course, it was a pity that the man had run off somewhere, because it disappointed his sister quite a bit. But perhaps it was all for the best, and if there were no more plans, they could go home earlier. Suddenly, someone said that they were being too loud, and people supported this, saying that everything was repeating itself today, and they should have been tired of it by now. The one who approached them was Veronica Laren, who was from the Count's family. The heroine saw her and despaired, realizing that this would not end well, and why today she decided to spoil her sister's mood even more, because her sister really disliked her. The heroine is unlikely to be able to easily pull her sister away and end the quarrel if it starts. The sister politely apologized for not showing her best behavior and thus inconveniencing us, and judging by this played-up tone, she was incredibly angry. Irina said that her younger sister was not feeling well, so she apologized and assured them that they would have to leave the banquet first. To which the attacker arrogantly asserted that this beautiful banquet could not be spoiled by the fact that she had decided to wear such a terrible dress and had brought this low-born child here, and therefore was glad that they were leaving. Her sister's features became more angry at the same moment, but Veronica was not going to finish, saying that her sister had come here dressed in such an extravagant dress to stand out and flaunt her beauty in front of the Archduke so that he would pay attention to her. She even brought this low-born child with her to stand out even more in contrast. But no luck. The man ran away without casting a single glance in their direction, and it seems that all efforts were in vain. The girl continued to provoke Irina, assuring her that she understood perfectly well what she was talking about. Since she was a few years old, it was customary to wear dresses in soft colors, but it was done for a reason, to honor the memory of those who died in the war. And so it was a great shame that she decided to disregard it. And she used to be an example for other aristocrats, and so she should have been ashamed to wear it to a banquet where the dead were honored. The heroine realized that she was in a quarrel. A lot of people were watching, and her sister could not stand it and hit her rival in the face, so she had to stop Veronica immediately, and her sister would really hit her. Lady Veronica made her debut just a year later than her older sister, and in her debut she even managed to attract everyone's attention. But a year later, all the attention was focused on the smart and polite Irina. The more Veronica began to pester her sister, the more she, who had tried to avoid conflict at first by holding back her anger, decided to no longer avoid conflict, unable to stand her eternal reproaches. In addition, this dress was recommended to her by her younger sister after hearing that she wanted to be noticed, and if her sister failed to become Archduchess because of her poor choice of clothes, it could be a real disaster. That's why the heroine decided to defend her sister, stating that this dress was often worn by the late Countess before, and as she should know, after the Count died in the war, his wife supported the soldiers who went to that war as much as she could. When they were about to go to a banquet in honor of the expected victory, the girl thought that it would be wonderful if the Countess could attend it with them, and that is why she came up with the idea to alter the dress that Madame wore before she died and give it to her sister to wear. As she finished, she felt a pain inside and wondered if she had really succeeded. She was, of course, confident in her creative skills because she was her sister, but still, she had to do it no matter what. Therefore, in the end, the heroine started crying, and she apologized to her sister for this stupid act, that she should not have offered such a thing, because in this way she desecrated the memory of the Countess and also stained her sister's honor. Suddenly, people around me started discussing it, surprised at how much respect they felt for the Countess, when only 5 years ago everyone liked to wear clothes with similar colors. At this point, Lady Victoria was accused of speaking in a rude and unworthy manner, and how she dared to make accusations without knowing all the circumstances of these decisions. After that, the girl was surrounded by admiring women who assured her that they were sure that the dress was bought in some fashion store and that the heroine was so skillful to create something so beautiful. Meanwhile, Victoria, realizing that she was losing the argument, decided to put pressure on the girl's family tree, accusing her of daring to say so much to herself, and how she dared to mention the Countess's majesty at all. The heroine thought that it didn't work, and perhaps she shouldn't have come here at all, but now the pain has only increased, and her head started to spin, so she would hardly be able to do anything now. She was thinking about sneaking up on her and saying some kind of spell that would finally shut her up, when her sister suddenly intervened. She turned to the impudent girl and said that she had heard a conversation that His Majesty was looking for a worthy match for the Archduke, and therefore planned to organize a grand banquet, secretly inviting selected ladies to attend. The list included not only Irina, but also other ladies from aristocratic families, but looking through the names of the invited ladies, she did not find her name there at all, and so she was now wondering what the reason was. Victoria was immediately nervous, asking why they were talking about it so suddenly. But her sister continued, assuring her that she was upset by what she heard, but that she should have thought about it before throwing accusations at her family, unfounded accusations. They were both daughters of Count families, only Irina was accepted, but her rival was not, which meant that her reputation, so tarnished that she was not even chosen as a worthy bride of the Archduke, did not even have a dress as beautiful as her younger sister's, and even her reputation was worse. Even her complexion looked more like dull dirt, but it wasn't the sister's fault. And having finished her moral destruction, Victoria couldn't stand it any longer and swung at Irina. But the blow missed its target. My sister intercepted her hand and came closer to her ear to whisper something. My sister said that she knew perfectly well that her rival was so jealous and was trying her best to become equal to her. But if she says one more time with her bad mouth that her sister is a mudblood or something like that, Irina will do something so bad to her that even hell will seem like heaven. So you shouldn't try her patience. The heroine was shocked that her sister could be so eloquent, both in her past life and now, and that she might have memories of the past. People around me started discussing everything again, saying that the princess was also wearing a red dress, and it was rude of her to say that in the room where her sister was, as if she was telling the princess that she should be ashamed of wearing that. They were sure that after this banquet, dresses of this color would be very popular among young ladies, and Lady Victoria herself, trying to show off, made herself look terribly ignorant. Victoria herself froze in place, ashamed of the shame, but her maid asked them to leave, after which she turned around and angrily strode out. Perhaps her sister didn't lose her temper because of this. She was just afraid that because of the noise, she or Irina herself might be the aggressors who tried to spoil the banquet with such inappropriate behavior. But people supported them, which meant that everything went smoothly. It turned out that her sister was waiting for the moment when all these people would take their side, and the girl was very pleased with this, because it turned out that aristocrats, at least sometimes, could have a conversation and not just ignore its existence. The heroine assured herself that it was all the merit of her sister, who never stopped taking her with her to official events and treated her as a human being, not humiliating her for her background, and never stopped caring for her. In her past life, she played the role of her sister's protector, but in this one, it was the other way around. The heroine caught herself thinking that she could no longer stand this pain, and she felt as if she was about to faint, but it was too early. She had to hold on a little longer for the sake of her sister who had so bravely protected her. Irina said that they would go to the restroom, to which her younger sister objected, saying that she would be able to walk alone now, and therefore it would be more important for her to thank everyone properly for standing up for them. She tried to pretend to be happy, assuring them that she thought they were wonderful people, and who knows, maybe in the future these people would become a force that would support her. But in the meantime, she could barely hold on to her tears because of the pain. When Irina finished, she said that her younger sister reminded her of someone, and when she asked who it was, she said that it didn't matter anymore, so she let the younger sister go without her, and the girl went to the balcony. After closing the door behind her, the heroine immediately fell to the ground, certain that if it hadn't been for Veronica joining them, she would have been able to suppress her strength immediately and then have a good rest. She was very lucky to be alone here. Sitting on the floor, the heroine was thinking about what to do with the wound her sister had left on Veronica's wrist, and began to realize that she was gradually losing her mind, and suddenly she couldn't control her mana anymore. At this point, the spell of transformation began to break, and she returned to her true form, while in the audience, meanwhile, people began to wonder at the Archduke's return. People didn't understand why he came back at the end of the banquet. Even the princesses had already left and gone home, so it didn't make sense anymore. But the man did not care at all. His thoughts were occupied with only one thing. He managed to go around as far as he could, but he did not find the source of the smell anywhere, and after making several circles around the house, he decided to return. He began to think that he was going crazy, perhaps because he was so sad for her, and he thought he could smell the exact scent that came from Hestia's mana, when suddenly he felt something strange coming from outside. And Irina had time to be disappointed in him. Secondly, because he still didn't care about the guests at all, he didn't even say a word to anyone. But noticing his stare, she realized that he was looking at the balcony where her sister was. At that moment, the heroine called her little beast again and ordered it to find and quickly heal Veronica's arm, and then quickly return. In a moment, she realized that this Veronica would most likely inflict a wound on herself again after healing. So she changed her order, saying that he needed to watch her for a few days and not let her inflict fresh wounds, after which the happy animal flew off to fulfill his errands. The heroine was not sure that this was the right decision. Perhaps she should have restored her mana first, and then, after thinking it over, sent him on a mission. But that girl is unpredictable. It is not known what her next move will be. Perhaps nothing terrible will happen if he successfully completes his mission and at the same time does not catch anyone's eye. But now was clearly not the time for that. And although she had no idea what might happen to him while he was on his mission, it was far more important to get back the mana that had left her body and seal it inside as soon as possible. The heroine realized that she would most likely have hellish pain again, although she could not even remember when she was not in pain. Because of this mana, she did not know how long she would have to endure this pain, and how long she would have to suffer because of it. And by this time, the Archduke had already come to the door, not realizing what he had just heard, what that noise was, and gathering his strength, he went inside, where the heroine was sleeping peacefully after finishing her work. The man thought he had made a mistake and was wasting his time, but when he saw the woman lying down, he decided to put her on a nearby bench. When he was done, he looked around and realized how calm he felt now. Since he had been driven only by the illusions of Hestia's revival, he felt rather strange, but perhaps for the first time since her death, he felt so peaceful. Looking at the sleeping girl, He noticed that her complexion was not very healthy. She must have been sick. But it was true that people often get sick, so he had to order the servants to bring something to cover her with. In a moment, he realized that he was doing something he didn't know what he was doing, and he mentally addressed Hestia, assuring her that he must be crazy, since he couldn't believe that for a moment he was interested in anyone but her. The man knew perfectly well that when they met again and he was with someone other than her, she would leave him not with a sense of jealousy, but with a sense of relief. In despair, he sat down on the ground, and he did not understand why, despite the fact that he had become so callous, he still wanted to hear her call him Yannick again. He went back to the memories of when he was still happy, when he came to her bed crying. Even though she asked him to go to sleep, he asked if she was in pain, but she only assured him that everything was fine and that he should go to sleep. Later, the heroine woke up, wondering why she had been dreaming about him lately, because at the time she was very upset about him, but apparently she felt some kind of attachment to him. Now she felt much better than before, and so she had to return to her sister as soon as possible, wondering how she had fallen asleep on the bench and where the bedspread had come from. She decided to find out how the family man was doing and whether he had managed to fulfill the order. Meanwhile, Victoria was in her room, in a state of shock, as she could not have inflicted the wound on herself. In any way, everything on her was healing, and there were no traces of the culprit of these events hanging on her long dress. Victoria realized that she could not hurt herself, not only on her arm, but also on her face, and in general on her whole body. She wanted to use the wound to ask her father, to crush them, but if everything went on like this, nothing would happen. The girl thought it was because of the relic that the princess had used during her speech, and then decided that she had no choice but to stab herself with a knife, and since it was nowhere to be found, and she had ordered her maid to stay away, she went to look for it herself. Around the corner, Victoria suddenly hit someone and fell to the ground, as she was not looking in front of her, and as soon as she wanted to accuse the person who hit her, she was taken by the hand by Archduke himself. He felt that Hestia's magic was coming from his hand, although it was weak, so much so that it could not be noticed by those who use weak mana, and at that moment, he needed an answer to where and by whom the trace of this magic was left. Before they could finish, they heard a strange squeak, and looking down, they noticed a family man who was almost crushed by a sudden fall. When she returned, the heroine remembered the banquet with horror. Now, she just wanted to wash in warm water and go to bed, but unfortunately it was time to start, and this was the only thing she could not avoid, the full moon rite. Saint Remardia, granting blessings to all, the status of the temple was absolute in the empire, which at its inception was decided to be a theocratic state. In an era when magic was used everywhere, temples played the role of sources of magic, priests treated the sick, engaged in politics, and made weapons. 500 years ago, for unknown reasons, after the end of the Great War, the world was left without most of the magic. But today, the temple scriptures and etiquette remain an obligatory part of the imperial aristocracy, and the most powerful magical objects were renamed sacred objects that were passed down from generation to generation in the imperial family. In her true form, the heroine flew to the place where the temple once stood, but now there are only ruins. There was a sacred tree that was illuminated by the moonlight. When she comes here, it always seems like it was only yesterday. The days when they spent time together, the three of them, with her sister, who in her past life was her maid at the temple, and whose likeness they wanted to make immortal, Yannick. It all seems to have started when the full moon is at its culmination. The heroine is no longer able to restrain her magic. She tries to seize the opportunity and persistently tries to get rid of the vessel. If the girl gives a slack for even a second, then this power will be able to get out, and at the same moment, it will destroy all the people in the empire, and so she could not under any circumstances allow this to happen. After all, this power was not supposed to enter this world from the very beginning, but it could not be contained inside for long, and there was certainly one way that would definitely help protect people, and she really didn't want to use it. But now, all she could do was to lock herself inside the vessel with the sealed force, and prepare the vessel to wait inside until the sealed force's attempts to get out were over. A man was riding a horse along a forest path, and his servants were following him, convincing him to return quickly, as they were far from civilization, and it was very dangerous to ride like that. It was the Crown Prince Aesor, and his servants did not understand what was happening, as the man even decided not to attend the Archduke's banquet, because he had been depressed since he returned from the war against the barbarians. But after his return, the Archduke was called a hero. The prince cursed that man. If only he could erase from his memory that moment, his dazzling shine of the sword blade and his phenomenal strength, he could easily take the prince's place with such power. He didn't know if Yannick was even a human being like himself, because the screw had spent his whole life honing his sword skills. So why did he have such incredible skills? In addition, he crossed the line of normalcy and became the most powerful magician, despite the fact that he had offended his sister. But his father was deeply indifferent, because his main concern was not to fall out of favor with the Archduke. Now he is no longer a hermit who hid in the shadows. Dangerous power, mastery of magic, influence on the imperial family, the power of swordplay. Yannick will be a problem even after the prince ascends the throne. Suddenly, he stopped his horse, realizing that he had gotten too far because of his thoughts, and in fact, it was very unlike him. As soon as his escorts reached him, he apologized to them and said that as a future ruler, he should not behave like that, and so he decided to just turn back. As a strong wind suddenly rose and made everyone present worry, the prince immediately realized that it was not an ordinary wind, but a magical one, something that was simply impossible to feel as a weak magician, or without any mana at all. There shouldn't have been such strong magic in the Empire, so it could have been an invader, and so he took his men and ran to check the cause. There was only some kind of balloon in the place, in which they were shouting for rescue. The heroine had a feeling that she was about to be torn apart, and so she prayed for rescue, for someone to stop this suffering. Her oldest memory from her past life is how she was taken to the Temple of the New Light as a little girl and dressed in white clothes. Even then, they caused her great pain. Countless times, they wanted to make her an immortal child through experiments. They cut her here and there, then stitched her up and cut her again, fed her all kinds of poisons. But no matter what they did, her body automatically healed, which made them insanely angry because the effect of the experiments was rolling back. Then, with this in mind, they suddenly said that there was something sinister inside her that should be sealed up and not allowed to come out. No one fully knew what this evil was or where it came from. Even she had never seen it herself. But even so, on the level of instinct, she felt perfectly well that this something must never be released. Otherwise, all life would come to an end. But the girl survived. Even after she was implanted with this something and continued to grow up as an ordinary person, the priests were disappointed because they wanted to make her immortal. Even so, once a priest learned that her blood could activate the power sealed in her body, so others decided to make special relics from her flesh and blood. And it seems that these relics are being passed down to this day, from generation to generation, as many as they plan to make. Although it is unlikely, given their greed, that they will ever stop. They think that the heroine does not know the whole truth. But she knows perfectly well that they are planning to perform a ritual soon, thanks to which this creature can come out, tearing its flesh in the process. She was so tired of it all. Her life had turned into hell because of this power. She had lost everything. But the children of the Empire could die, and if she hadn't saved them, she would have died. In any case, the girl did not think about her death. She should start thinking about her future death. And then, it is better to think about what she could do for people while alive. These thoughts calm her down. Many of the test subjects died. So why did they need to do this at all? How much longer will she suffer like this? Why was she reborn again, and how did she manage to meet her sister? And if she tries not to think about it, she will definitely be able to smile like before tomorrow. And at that moment, the vessel collapsed, and she emerged from it, which surprised the people who came to fight the invaders. When she was done, she breathed a sigh of relief, glad that it was over. But a moment later, she met the prince's eyes, and then, frightened, she immediately flew away. The escorts, shocked by what they saw, said they could not catch up with her and asked what to do next. But in her place, they just ruffled feathers. When she came back, she was desperate. She had never seen any people there before, but this time she was very unlucky and was caught at the wrong time. Suddenly, she heard screams coming from her sister's room, which turned into a vision in which she wanted to save Hestia, but was stopped by the priests. She could not escape, and prayed for Yannick to save her. She asked why. Why her mistress was willing to sacrifice herself for these people. They tormented her so much. And the girl did not care deeply what would happen if she did not do this, because Miss Hestia was much more important to her than anyone else. At that moment, they started taking her away, and all she could do was cry and call for her. When she entered the room, she noticed her sister crying in her sleep and called for her to come back. Since childhood, her older sister has been saying that she constantly has nightmares, but she doesn't remember what exactly happened. But over time, she became more and more convinced that her sister was her friend from the past, whose screams she heard in her dreams. The heroine has understood this since childhood, that the child, her only friend, was also reborn, which meant that even in the new world, she would not be alone. After her reincarnation, for reasons that are not clear, she was very lonely and confused. But now there was no reason to be afraid anymore, because she always had people close to her. Perhaps it was even good that my sister didn't remember her past life, because it was full of painful memories. So it wasn't so bad that she was the only one who remembered those days. After her younger sister sings her a song, she falls asleep quite quickly and very deeply. So the girl hoped that very soon she would not have scary dreams, but only pleasant and good ones, because she wants this child to be happy in this life. In the same dream, Irina was running in the grass with Hestia when she was a little girl, and she called her her only friend, which is how people usually called people they consider very close, the heroine taught. The girl said that she had never been called that before, claiming that she did not have a name, but from today she would be called her friend, because she called her Hestia in a similar way. When she woke up, her sister was ready to focus all her attention on the Archduke, as the banquet was to last for 3 days, so the older one assured her that only invited aristocrats could come to the banquet today, and therefore the younger one had to just stay in the room and wait for him to return. After the maids left, the girls were left alone, and so it was an opportunity for a serious conversation. So the heroine asked why her sister wanted to become an archduchess so badly, since that person was very strange. She could have married the prince of their country, because he is the heir to the throne, is good with a sword, very friendly, and quite handsome, although this is all just a rumor. The older sister said that she had a good reason for doing so, and that the younger sister was simply required to obediently do whatever she told her. Today there will be much fewer people and the hall will not be so crowded, so the chance to attract the man's attention will be much greater, and the younger one will only have to support her in achieving her goal. When she finished, the sister added that she had another nightmare today, and she heard the younger one singing to her through the dream, so she thanked her for this care. Already in the ballroom, in the Archduke's mansion, Irina was drinking wine, waiting for her husband, at such a pace that she thought she would be drunk, but he was still not there, and maybe he would come again at the end. When she suddenly noticed him, the man was not alone, but accompanied by someone whom Irina had hoped not to see. He came with Veronica, and no one understood how it happened. Meanwhile, in the corridor, the heroine was walking around the Archduke's residence, admiring how much everything was made of gold, all these sparkles shining so brightly. She wanted to take it with her, but when she heard the scream, she immediately hid, hoping that she hadn't done anything yet. The voice was addressing Yuri and asking him to be quiet, and she immediately noticed that it must be the princess. The princess was not going to calm down, claiming that the Archduke dared to make his partner a miserable Lady Veronica, who was only the daughter of an ordinary baron, and rejected her, the princess of this kingdom. The heroine was visibly surprised by this, thinking that her sister could turn everything upside down out of anger, but the argument did not end. The princess accused her brother of being strange today. He had always defended the Archduke before and was on his side, but today for some reason he was looking at these feathers all day, issuing a minimal set of phrases. Looking closer, the girl noticed a man who would not give the feathers to her sister, despite the fact that she wanted them very much, claiming that they were his alone. She recognized him as the person she had seen yesterday, and it turned out that he was the princess's brother and also the crown prince. And it turned out that she had been exposed in front of the prince of this country, and it frightened her. The heroine realized that those were her feathers that she had left in the temple, which meant that the imperial family might have records of her past life, and it was dangerous for her. She thought about taking them, but in doing so, she risked revealing her true identity. But she decided to postpone this issue for later, since right now she was more worried about her sister, so she decided to call a familiar and quietly entered the ballroom to take her away. After walking a little further, the heroine realized that she could not summon it, and the man who had it realized that this beast was similar to the familiars of Hestia, who had been with her 500 years ago. This time there could be no mistaking it, as her mana was coming from him, and so he was sure that the woman had also been reborn, and this time it was not a dream or an illusion, and now he was determined to find her. Before the start of the second day of the banquet, the Archduke visited the family's home, Raylan, and immediately went to negotiate with the owner to accompany his daughter. The Count himself was apprehensive about this, so he assured her that if his daughter suddenly made a mistake, he had apologized in advance, and therefore he asked her to return to where he had come from, to which he said only briefly and threateningly that he wanted to accompany his daughter and would not repeat it a second time, thus making the Baron frightened. He thought about it. The man had heard that Veronica had gotten into serious trouble yesterday, but what could she do if the Archduke himself decided to come to their residence? Now all the attention was on him, so the Baron could not get close to him, because it would mean that they were not holding the imperial family for anything, as well as Princess Yuri herself, who wanted to be his bride. And besides, he could not let this man control his daughter. Given how obsessed she was with him, it could become a big problem in the future, and so he had to send him back at any cost. Addressing the Archduke, the Baron assured him that he was very sorry and would speak to his daughter personally, but with a gesture, the guest shut his mouth. His master. The man said that the Baron was only wasting his time, and therefore it was necessary to change the way of negotiations, and at that moment the servant brought a box with many precious stones in it, and the man assured him that these were very rare siren's tears in the amount of 20 pieces. These are stones, the rarest jewel that can only be mined in deep waters, and they are also one of the most expensive minerals in the empire, each of them costing as much as real estate in the country's capital. The Baron was shocked by this, so he searched for a rational explanation. Perhaps the man wanted to get their family into some big trouble, and the guest himself, not hearing an answer, decided that this was not enough, decided to raise the price to 30 or 50. Previously, the Baron thought that this man simply had a title, but it turned out that he had supernatural abilities for a human being, and he also had power over the fates of aristocrats. Plus, he was also incredibly rich, and despite all this, Yannick was a recluse, and because of this he looked like a beast that could not be controlled. The guest said that he had already given a lot of time, and therefore his patience was running out, since he had already waited so long, and the Baron was just a fool who did not feel the urgency of this matter. Therefore, there would be no peaceful solution to the problem, and so the man asked the Baron if he really wanted to be removed, and the Archduke's expression said by itself that he was not joking. The Baron was seriously frightened by this turn of events, and assured him that he would call his daughter at that very moment. He did not know why the man wanted to do this, but he was a man who had the power to destroy the entire kingdom. At this time, the Duke was walking through the hall, holding Victoria's hand, and she was a little worried about the fact that everyone was looking at her now. But when she noticed Irina, she felt better, realizing that the place with the Archduke would not be hers, as he had already made his choice. At that moment, the man told her not to look around, but to hurry up and do everything as he said, and to check whether all the people on the list had arrived today. She hesitantly said that she had already checked everything, and then noticed that he was looking for someone. Irina and that illegitimate child were crossed out, so he could definitely not worry about them. She didn't know who that person was, but because of that, he needed her, which meant it was a great chance to rub his nose in those who were turning up their noses at her. And it would also be great to get rid of the terrible bat that was forced to hang on her. The man told her to follow him slowly and to keep her back straight, and the girl assured him that she would do whatever he wanted. Just listen to her request. The girl said that her father asked her to tell him that he wanted to return the jewelry that the man had given him, because if someone found out about it, her family could have big problems, and then she asked him to dance the first dance that opened the ball. The Archduke also said that he had one request for her, after which he whispered that both she and her father were not worthy of life at all, which made the girl start to worry. He had put his hand on the bat in advance so that it would not be able to disappear after its owner dispelled the spell, and therefore they had to find its owner as soon as possible, because when they touched it, the beast would turn into mana, and Hestia would consume it. And as soon as it begins to turn into mana, then he will find it at the same moment in whatever form it is now. There is not much left to suffer. The Archduke nevertheless agreed, assuring her that if she could do what he wanted, he would in turn fulfill any of her wishes. But he hoped that she would do a good job in this role, because in this room was someone he really wanted to find. But if suddenly, because of her, he could not do it, she would have to pay for it. After that, he took her hand and they started dancing, but he asked them not to dance on the spot, but to spin around the hall, and all the guests present were surprised by this, since there was supposed to be an introductory thing first. At this point, Irina made her way closer, assuring him that she was no longer going to watch all this in silence, and the little family man saw this and compared the girl to an angry bear. After that, he flew away in fear, but the man was not upset, as it could be for the best, as he would be able to find Hestia faster. But in a moment he realized that if she were here, she would immediately react to what had happened. Meanwhile, the heroine, with the help of magic, was able to see what her family man saw. She did not understand what was happening there, and for some reason could not call him to her. Apparently the Archduke was holding him with his magical power, and their connection was quite unstable. She didn't understand why he was caught. Perhaps because it was the first time the man had seen the magical creature. But the girl's thoughts were interrupted by a man who suddenly appeared from behind the door. He recognized her at once, and she realized that it was the man who had seen her yesterday. But she decided not to show it, and bowed respectfully, asking how the prince knew the name of such a worthless person like her. The heroine decided that this was a good chance to find out about the pen, and the prince, meanwhile, told her that he could not help but know this name, and that he was lucky to meet the girl in such an unusual setting, and then took her hand, saying that he was eager to meet her. The heroine was unsure why he was looking for her, and the man said that yesterday she was wearing an elegant pink dress with bare shoulders. The girl confirmed this, after which the prince added that last night she was also wearing it. The girl was horrified. This man was using the clothes he saw last night as a clue, and how did he even know what she was wearing if he wasn't even at that banquet? The man said that all members of the imperial family have professional spies. They are always near the members of this family. They usually do what they do, hiding their presence, being their ears and eyes in their absence. After he found out what had happened to Yuri that day, he also learned about the clothes and was told that only she was wearing them that day. And then he asked her to tell him about everything that happened last night. Returning to the ballroom where everyone saw a bat suddenly appear out of nowhere and fly up to the chandelier, the Archduke, in one quick movement, jumped after it and gently brought it down. After all this, something unexpected happened. The man slammed his foot on the ground, and the whole place began to collapse around him, spreading panic and fear, and with one shout he chased everyone away, saying that the ball was over. After that, he turned to Veronica and told her to listen to him carefully, saying that they had already paid in full for what had happened earlier. At that moment, the prince, who was demanding an answer from the heroine, heard all this noise and suggested that she pay attention only to him, and at that moment, suddenly for the man, the girl burst into tears. She recalled an emergency survival guide that Irina had told her about, which ended with the phrase, "If you don't want to answer, or have nothing to say, then you just have to cry." Later, when she calmed down a bit, the man continued to ask her about the dress, and she said that he was right, and that night she did wear it. After that, to his surprise, she said that she had not stolen it. It might seem strange that an illegitimate child like her was wearing such a gorgeous dress, but she could explain it. She was wearing the dress that her sister had decided to throw away, and she was just tired of the necklace and asked to throw it away with the dress, but she decided to wear it. And then she went around all day, bragging to everyone who teased the maids, and she even had thoughts of not taking it off even at night. But when she was scolded for it, she had to take it off. Listening to this, the man assured her that he had not intended to talk about her like that at all. And then, on reflection, he decided that he must have made a mistake, since they had different eye and hair colors. He also didn't feel quite the same mana he had felt that night, after which he decided that he had misread the clothes the lady was wearing, and in general, he knew that it would not be easy to find her. The prince turned to the girl, explaining that he was just looking for the owner of this feather. That night she shone under the moonlight like a pearl, and then he lost his head from that beauty. The girl was confused by these words, but looking at the quill closer, it seemed as if it was gradually losing the mana it had been filled with, perhaps because of its transformation, and whether it would slowly disappear over time, just like the familiars. She didn't think it was possible. She hadn't had to transform in the past, and maybe she shouldn't even try and think of a way to steal it. The man was very upset about his mistake, but since the pen would not go anywhere while he had it, he could try to find that person again. The heroine thought that the prince should have felt the mana slowly disappearing on this feather, although most likely it was because it was very weak, and a person who did not have a skillful skill, or was born with no mana at all, would hardly be able to see anything. Apologizing once again for scaring her, the man assured her that he still needed to say hello to Herzog, and the girl had a plan if he didn't feel like using weak mana. Then she will be able to influence the pen, and even if she makes a little joke about it, he will still not realize it. And if everything goes according to plan, the return of the family name from the Archduke will be easy. Sitting in the ruined hall, the man assured himself that he needed to calm down. All was not lost, and he could try again, as the familiars were still in his hands, and even if he failed this time, he could still try to find her if he investigated the suspected people, when suddenly the beast shone and his mana began to react. Meanwhile, Irina regained consciousness, scolding the Archduke, accusing him of having caused all this disorder, not thinking at all about the guests, when the heroine came in, hugging her beloved sister tightly. They decided that it was time to leave the place, and my sister said that he canceled the banquet tomorrow. She thought she could tolerate him, but it was too much. At the same time, the familiar finally turned into mana, and the man followed it, realizing that this was the chance he had been waiting for, and running after the mana flow. He was already anticipating the meeting. He wondered whether she remembered him after the rebirth, whether she remained the same or changed, her appearance, character, voice, whether he would have to get to know her all over again, and whether she would call him Janich again. His reaction became stronger and stronger, which meant that they were close. The man was ready to accept her as anybody, if only she would come back. At that moment, the prince was walking towards him, because his feather began to run away from him. They met each other's eyes, not understanding what was happening, and the man recognized the feather. It was Hestia's feather. And after the mana from the familiars entered the feather, everything around them shone with an incredible light. Meanwhile, the girls were returning to the carriage, and the sister did not want to explain anything about her appearance. So, swearing at the Archduke, they both got in. After getting into the carriage, the heroine realized that the spell she had cast on the prince's pen had just broken, so she made the duke's familiars touch the prince's pen so that their mana would merge and both would dissipate. This meant that the heroine's plan had worked, and she was very happy about it. From now on, neither the Archduke nor the prince would be a cause of her anxiety anymore, and she could now sleep peacefully. The men, meanwhile, saw before their eyes what they cherished, especially Herzog, who now felt no mana at all. It was gone completely, and only one person could do this. The clues he had been waiting for 1,000 years disappeared in a single moment. The prince watched in silence as the man blamed himself for what had happened, and did not understand why he was doing it, after which he abruptly asked where the feather had been found. The prince was also determined. He just said hello and added that he was not going to tell me anything, but it was worth saying hello at least out of politeness. And at that moment, he remembered the words of the emperor, who warned him against betraying the Archduke, because if they made him their enemy, he could wipe out the entire imperial family with his magic, and therefore it was better to get close to such a person. The prince decided that it would be better to listen to the older man's advice, so he did not tempt fate, but honestly answered that he had accidentally found it and picked it up after a mysterious lady had lost it one moonlit night. The man became visibly agitated when he heard that the prince had seen her, and the prince, in turn, noticed that the Archduke had probably been looking for her yesterday too, and wondered if they had known each other for so long, and why he was so desperate to meet her. The prince was terribly annoyed that this particular person was looking for the same thing as him, and therefore said that he did not know where she was now, but decided to tell him that yesterday she was wearing a pale pink dress and an emerald-colored necklace, thus thinking that he was cornering him. The other man began to remember who he had seen in such an outfit, and he remembered the lady with the red hair he had met on the balcony.